Hey, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with doing some more lighting. In our previous tutorials we did some portrait lighting and learning how to do single light lighting and working up to 3-point lighting for portrait lights. And hopefully you've got a good idea of how to use just single Arnold lights at the moment. And now we're going to move on to sort of actually lighting a scene. So we're just going to do the stairwell shot. And we're just going to go through and how to do a very basic light setup for it. So if you're enjoying this little series of lighting, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help. So yeah, let's get going. Okay, cool. So I've got Maya open and I've already set up my PureRef. I'll put a link in the description for it. It's really useful. It just means that I can drag and drop my reference in here and it'll always stay on top. So at the moment I've just got my HDRI in here just so I can look around to sort of spotlights, because if you don't have it, it's not hugely necessary, but all data is very useful. It gives you an idea of where the lights are. And also have this crazy guy here with his light probes and Macbeth charts, and these are really useful for sort of finding out what the light interaction is doing. And we can sort of see that when we put our CG boards in, it will start to come very much clearer. And you can see why these are still very important pieces of data when you go out on set. So it allows you to get your lighting very close, and effectively, in reality, the most important part of VFX is probably the lighting. It's the hardest thing to achieve and make it look really realistic, whereas a lot of it's very easy to make it look wrong basically, but this is sort of allows you to get it really close. So these are really useful tools to use. They don't have to be perfect tools, they just have to show you what's going on. So don't be worried if you're seeing super expensive ones. You can just use a garden sphere or something like that. But anyway, I'm chatting on. So we're just going to load in all the stairwell data stuff. I'm just going to file, import. We're still on that one, so just go to my lighting, stairwell, and I'm just going to load in the set geo first. Cool. And you can see we're still at Houdini scale, so it's really small. 100 times too small. And we'll import our camera in. And then we can look for our camera. We can move this a bit out of the way because that's actually not in a great spot. So you can just move this around and it still does what it needs to do. And I'm just going to change my frame range to that actual range of the footage. So it's quite a long frame range, and you don't have to use all of this. You can use, the reason why I've done it so long is so you can pick and choose small segments. You don't like, I don't want to you don't have to do anything. You might want to just do that bit or use this bit or anything. You don't have to render off 500 frames of a simulation. You can just do whatever you want with it. Cool, so now we've got our camera, and let's load in our image plane. I'm just going to select my camera, get image plane, import image, and just get lighting, undistorted plate, and load that in. And you see we won't see anything yet, because we need to change our use image sequence, change our alpha gain to 0.7, and change our depth to 1. So now we can see our footage. So if we scrub through our timeline, we can now see, just select our geometry, we can see everything's fitting really well. If we just hide our geometry for a while as well and just hide the grid. So let's actually go back, and so we can see our image plane clearer. Let's change our alpha gate to 1. So a lot of the time you may not have all this sort of data, the HDRIs and the light probes and stuff. So your best point of reference is to analyze your plate first. So it's very easy to just quickly throw in loads of lights, and albeit this is probably quite a simple shot to light, because we see the lights and we can see a lot of clues what's going on in the shot. So particularly what's a good thing to do is just see how many lights you really see in the shot, and that'll give you a good idea. And we're not going to even think about what's in the reference at the moment. We're just going to assume that it's not there. Then we'll use it to assist our lighting. Cool. So we can obviously see we've got one big sort of tube light up here, and I know the color on this has been in neutral graded, so all the whites have been it's pretty much been it's just been neutral graded basically. So it should be pretty flat, and there's no like sort of warmth or coldness. It's just that the white balance is matched. So hopefully we shouldn't have too much of problems with matching color, because it should be neutral. But anyway, we see some of the things to look out for. There's obviously our lights, but also as a key thing is our shadows. It's the one thing that's going to tell you things that you can't see. For instance, we can only see one light, but it's fairly evident just by the shadow cast on this rail. We have multiple light sources because we have multiple shadow casts. So if we look down here, we can see like a spike of shadow go down here, and a spike of shadow from this rail, and it's sort of spreading out, so it's quite diffuse as well. So it's not super harsh, it's quite soft shadow. We've got this really soft shadow up here as well. So that's what we want to do. We want to really try and replicate this as close as we can. And we can see on the stairs, it's almost super flat, very minimal shadow. You can't really see much. It's just really soft. Some of the other things as well is looking at the tones of the painting. So we can sort of see, obviously this is probably all the same color, at least, maybe, who knows. And we can see there's some darker tones here in shadow, but it's not completely sort of blacked out. So that would assume that we do have more field lighting behind us. And also here we can see that actually this light is off here. We've got a light, but it's not actually doing anything. And we've also got what can look very confusing. This is not the roof. This is just the shadow cast. So always look through your plate and just see what clues you can get first. And the simplest thing to do when you're doing VFX light shots is just place the lights where you see the lights in the shot. And if you've got some nice geo, if someone's been very good and done you a good job, like this, you know where the lights are because the lights have been modelled in. And we can safely assume that these lights probably are identical throughout, so it should be very easy to place them. And because we've got ref as well, we can also look at that as well. So I'm just going to pull this up. This is why it's pretty important to sort of take as much reference as you can, because we can see the HDRL is taken directly onto this light here. And for the other clues, for our lighting, we can see that there's actually another light down here because there's quite a lot of light cast. And same up here. So we've got lights on all the floors. So because we're just lighting here, we don't want to put just a light here, otherwise we're not going to achieve the similar sort of global illumination. Because even though this light up here is not directly affecting it, the bounce and the global illumination is probably helping somewhat down here as well. It's probably why everything's quite soft and there's not really much shadow. But then we can look at our reference balls. This crazy guy, you can tell that's like 5 or 6 in the morning. And we've got our reference here of what our sort of in-shot reflections and lights are like. So we can see a light down at the bottom of the stairs. I think that's the bottom of the stairs, can't really tell. It's not very clear. That's why I took multiple ones, so we can see it's a little bit clearer. And that's actually upstairs. We can see the shadow cast here. And I do like to, if you can, you may not always have time, is just sort of flip the balls around, give 2 different perspectives of how the light's reacting on different sides. It should be fairly similar. It shouldn't be drastically different, but it may reveal some extra stuff that you don't see. As for, I think in this one you actually see, now you see actually the upper light as well. So it's actually revealed, if I didn't have that reference, it's showing me there's actually another light up here. So the chrome balls are really useful for sort of discovering where all the lights are. And obviously, once we've done our initial sort of layout of the lights, we will use these to fine tune our lighting. I wouldn't necessarily go straight off the bat using these, because it's very much you want to just block it in, see what it's like, then fine tune it, because you don't want to go straight into fine tuning. And we can also see what's quite useful here as well. We've actually got quite a glossy wall here as well, and there's some reflections going on. So it's all good stuff to sort of look at and see what's going on. We have our Macbeth charts in here, which This isn't a linear, I think this is still linear, so it's going to look a little bit washed out. And it's the same with these. But these are just converted to JPEG, so you'll have the raw files as well. I've just put them as JPEGs in a PureRef just for ease. Cool, so what we will do first is move this out of the way. And like I said before, we're in a tiny scale. So because this was kind of like for a Houdini simulation, but it was kind of anyone can use it. It's not necessarily you can have Spider-Man crawling down there if you want. So I'm just going to change this to 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. I know I'm centimeters because I just always work in centimeters, I believe. Let me actually double check that. It's always good to double check, even if you're 100% sure. So not that I'm doubting. I'm pretty sure it's in centimeters, yeah. Cool, and we can see that this is a meter cube and we're tiny. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to group all my cameras in set geo. And I'm just going to scale it up by 100. And you don't necessarily have to do this because you're effectively working in decimeters. So it's an equal sort of, it's a sort of an equal scale. So it's in like, the decimeters would be like 10 and you're actually working in, I'm not sure what these would be, I'm assuming still decimeters, but 100th decimeters, I'm not too sure. Basically 100th scale of real scale, which is 1 to 1. So now just by scaling this up, the whole group up by 100, we're back at real world scale. And different places work in different ways. The reason why you work in different scales is, I believe, because it's like the floating point, something about floating point number. And if you have the scale way too big on big environments, it starts going a little bit crazy. I might be wrong on that. But yeah, it's always good to sort of keep big scenes quite small. But if it's isolated small things like this, you can have them at real world scale. But obviously if you're simming in other packages like Houdini, you'll have to scale it down. And the same in Maya. If you're using, can't remember what it's called, the fluid simulator in Maya, it still needs to be in decimeters as well. So it's always good to keep an eye on scale and stuff like that. So what I will do is, do you know what, I'm just going to call this rescale. And we can remove this from here, or we can just leave it as it is. I'm quite inclined to, well, no, actually, if we leave this as it is, you're going to get weird stuff on the camera. Mostly in your 2D pan zoom. And you can see, like, I'm not moving it very much at all. And it will feel like your 2D motion has got a multiplier on it. And it's just really super sensitive. This is because you used to have a scale transform on it. So what we'll do is actually we'll bake this out. So I'm just going to create a locator. I'm going to select my camera, then my locator. So I'm going to go to animation, constrain. And you can go to parent and maintain offset off. And if you click apply, that's now going to add a locator to that position. And we can select all the location, translations and rotations. Go edit, keys, and you can select from channel box, but because there's not very much in the scene, I think that's just out of habit. It can make it faster if you've got lots of stuff in there. And also I should have probably hidden the image plane because now this is going to take quite a while. I might be able to actually escape that. You can see how slow that was going. So if I go show, image planes, let's undo that. Can I undo bake? Cool. So we've got our image plane hidden. So now if we do that again, edit, keys, bake simulation, see how much faster that is because we're not caching through the image cache basically. So be aware of that as well. That things can take a lot longer, but they don't necessarily have to. Cool, so now we've done that, we can delete our parent constraint. And we can press Shift P. Shift P removes things from groups with compensating the sort of offset. So ours is 100. So I'm just going to freeze that, delete the history. And the reason why you want to do this, because this is also a lembic camera, but we can rebake onto it. So if we Shift P onto that, it will revert straight back to outside of its group on a camera. So we're back at 1/100th scale. So now we just select our locator, then our camera. Go do the same again, constrain, parent, apply. Now our camera is back at our offset position. And you need to do the same thing as well. So select all your translations of rotations, edit, keys, bake simulation. So this is just like useful tips to know. Don't necessarily always have to do this, but we can delete that parent constraint now. Now if we go back into our computer, our camera, if we use our 2D pan zoom now, we've got control back. It doesn't seem like it's multiplying on a scale, so that's now useful to us. So if we show our image planes, we can now navigate around much easier. Cool, so now we've sorted that out, we don't necessarily need that. We can get rid of that. And there's our meter cube. And I know we've already checked, but that looks like a meter to me. That seems to be fitting because this is all scaled correctly. It's just been scaled as per Houdini, so we don't need that. So now we're pretty much ready. So what we kind of want to do is just start creating lights. So I'm just going to go Arnold, lights, area light. You can see this is coming here. I say it every time you scale this, it will affect the fall off and the softness of the shadow, so just be aware of that. I'm just going to snap it up here where the light is. And this is very basic sort of a method to go around this. So you could effectively still use the HDRI, it's fine. You could remap that onto the geometry. You could take parts of the HDRI and use them as HDR lights, so you could chop out the lights and place them here. But for this, we're just going to go with just what we see in shot and trying to duplicate the lights as best we can see. So I'm just going to look at our pure ref. So we've got this light here, and if we look down on each of these floors, we can see on every floor on our camera side, there's a light that's on every level. But on our camera, we can tell there's actually under us, there's no light there. So we can safely assume that these lights duplicate upwards apart from here, because that one's off. So I'm just going to go to perspective. I'm not going to change any of them. And you know what, I'm going to actually name these as area light. You can call these anything you want. I'm going to call these 0 because it's my neutral. It's what I see in camera. It's just kind of how I sort of see things. So you don't have to, you can call it whatever makes sense to you. I'm just going to duplicate that up. Cool. And we don't actually have a roof here, so I thought I did. I may have removed it. Yeah, you might have a different file to this. I don't remember it being like this, but anyway. So I'm just going to call this +1. Can't actually put that in. +1. So I know that's my one above. Then I'm just going to. Well, I don't actually need one below that because it's actually not on. So it's quite hard to navigate through this. So I'm just going to put my wireframe back on. So we've got our one light up here, and we don't need to do that one. But we do know, if I Control D, we do know there's lights here. I know it can be quite tricky to see in wireframe. So it's important to sort of really get a good idea of where these light positions are. And it can be hard to see, but it'll give you good clues. So we can sort of almost see that these lights are not like offset, they're kind of almost in the center of the rails and quite evenly spaced from that edge. So try and get that as close as possible. Because at the end of the day, you want your lighting as accurate as you can get, and that means just trying to get them in. Luckily for VFX, a lot of the, I say that it's not simple to do this sometimes. It can be incredibly difficult, especially with creative lighting as well. But always your best strategy to start off with is duplicate as close as you can to the lighting positions. And sort of best guesstimation always helps. So I'd say it's kind of in the middle. It's hard to say. So I'm just going to duplicate this one up. And I'm going to call this 0 back. You can call these whatever makes sense to you. So 0 is where my camera is going to be. +1 is 1 floor up. And then I'll do -1 is 1 floor down. So I'm just going to duplicate this across, because there is other lights also across there for my reference. And these aren't directly affecting, will be affecting a light, but it'll be adding to the diffusion of the light. So it's very good to not dismiss lights that you don't necessarily see in the plate, because there could just be more stuff that you don't see that could be adding to it. It's quite hard to see. Let's turn our X-ray on. So I'm just going to select these two. I'm just going to duplicate them up. Let's turn off X-ray. Ooh. So these are back ones, and these are 0 back. I know it might not get a bit confusing. This is probably not a very good method of doing this, but it's what makes sense to you. Because now I know these are my 0 is the one that's in my camera. And everyone works differently. This is no set way to do it. Not everyone does it like this, but it just makes it easier for me. So I know this is my area light +1 above, and I know there's not one on down here. These are my area back 0 back ones, and +2s. I can't actually put that, but yeah, it'll sort of make rough sense. It's just so we can go back to them and we can tweak them. Cool, so I'm just going to go now to my FX stairwell camera. And I'm just going to apply a new material, Arnold. I'm just going to apply a standard surface first. I'm just going to call this test. And obviously this sort of method is only good if you've got lots of geo already. But what we're going to do, we're basically just going to render what we see. And we should be able to get a very close or similar sort of lighting from what we have just by roughly placing it. We just kind of want to change our color on it, because if it's pure white, it's just going to absolutely blast light throughout it. So I'm just going to make it a darker shade of grey and reduce our specular down quite a lot. So I'm going to select my camera. I'm just going to turn my image plane off. So now if I just go to my Arnold render view, let's bring this back across. And you can see we have nothing, because our lights are probably far too underexposed. And even if we stop it up, we're not going to see anything. Cool, so we can just go through all of these and change our exposure, or we can go to our Windows, rendering, and go to our light editor. I think I've just got a habit of calling it a light lister from 3ds Max, but it just means that we can now not have to click on them one by one, we can edit them all together. So our intensity is on 1 and our exposure is on 0. So this is pretty much those lights are not really doing much unless you're working on an extremely small scale. So I'm just going to change all my exposure to 12 at first. And you can see how much easier this is. I can just select them. You might be able to select all of them, but I just want to make sure that I've got my manual control on each one, so I know what I'm doing. So I'm assuming all these lights are exactly the same sort of. Obviously, they won't be from time, age, how long they've been there, if they're damaged, because you get the ones that are slightly damaged and they flicker. But these are all sort of things you can take into consideration when you're trying it. Cool. So now you can see we're actually getting some light going on here, and if I just stop it up on here, we can see we're getting something really close to what we actually have in shot. Albeit our light cast is a bit too heavy, which means that we probably need to add on our spread, but we're getting pretty much what we want. We're getting these tones here of clear shadows. It's very soft. I'd definitely say there's quite a lot of shadow cast here which we might want to change, but also this reflection on this rail is looking really good. It's looking, without comparing it between two, we won't really know, but so we've stopped this up by 5. Let's put that back to 0. And let's change these all. Let's go to 14. We're effectively the same. It's the same as like blocking with anything. Always block in, even if it's all different methods, but I always like to sort of do very basic stuff first, block it in and see how you get with it. So, still very dark. But that could also be because of our textures as well. So if we put this up, see how much light we're bringing to it. And obviously if it's pure white, it's going to affect things differently. We don't necessarily want it pure white because nothing's really pure white. We can just bring it down, unless it's brand new painted. That's of course. I don't think this place has been painted in a very long time. So we can see how the weights and stuff affect it. So you can see how actual textures affect lighting as well. That's why you kind of will need to keep it all very closely in a linear workflow. So let's change our exposure to 15 on each of these. And this is not like an absolute set way. This is kind of just how I would do it at first. See, oh, it could be because that's still on 12. Let's see how much of a difference that makes. Yeah. So I think like for our test, we're looking pretty good. We've got this nice cast up here. Obviously this is super reflective. We don't really want that. So like I said before, when we were checking our footage, let me just pull that over here. Sorry, that's a bit messy. One of our sort of key clues was the sort of light cast on here. So if we just see what's going on with our rain, we don't have to render the whole thing. We can just crop region and see what that's doing, because that's kind of showing us almost quite a lot. This is showing us that we do have in the plate, we do have multiple light sources. Cool, and just from where we see that we've got this shadow cast down here and this shadow cast down here and a very light one up here. Almost you can't really even see it, but it's very slight. Let's see if we can get that whole rail in and just have a look at it. Because it's very very light cast up here. And that could just be finely tuning a light up there. But I think it might be hard for you to see, but there's definitely a slight cast here. Very small, but just enough, I think. So all we've done really is literally just place the lights where we think they are. And I think we've definitely got some quite coarse shadows here, which we probably don't want. So I think we need to bring, we need to soften them possibly a little bit, but let's actually bring back our image plane and just analyze that a bit. Or in fact, we can just go to our pure ref. You can see there's very soft sort of shadows down here. There's nothing really. What cast is in there is not really what's happening in the shot. So we need to try and make this a bit more diffused. And the key thing is to find out where these actual shadow lights are coming from. Cool. So you can kind of see as I'm going through, just isolating each of the light. And it's quite a useful tool to go through your light lister. So this is our back plus one right at the top, and almost you can see, like, in reality, if you just looked at that, that's almost doing nothing. But even though we're stopping it up, there is something happening here. So even though we've placed lights where we can't see lights and we don't know if they even exist, we've done it logically, and we believe that it's adding something to the shot. So even if you don't see it, it's definitely doing something. So this is always a nice little method I like to do, and sort of go through, and you can see this as well. You can see as closer we're getting to the floors. So we're now on the neutral back lights. This is the one that's behind us. And this is the +1 shape, so that's further up. And shape 0, so this one should be 1 on our level. So we're going to just try and find where those harsh shadows are coming from. Looks like it could be this one. So we've got our back 2 plus shadow. Oh no, I'm doing the wrong one. Sorry, I'll do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to work together to try and reduce this sort of shadow cast. See, we've added more now, so let's do this a different way. Let's put them all back at the equal intensity, because we can assume that they probably are. And this is hard to record with one screen. I'm just going to close that for now. So I want this light, I believe. I just want to soften it, really. And we can change this to the spread, but obviously our spread is already at maximum. So if we bring this down, it's probably going to make it worse. Where's my thing not working? You can see just by, I know like now we're kind of going at the reality of the size of this light, but we're affecting how the shadow is cast on it. And we can even bring, so if we brought our spread all the way down, you can see what's going to happen. So let's change this to 14, let's bring it down a bit. But let's see what happens if we just bring it all back up to 16. It's a lot of trial and error, getting it to look right. So there's no 100%, well, if you've got lots of experience in lighting, you probably just do this really quick. This is still just like a beginner's sort of thing, but and it's possibly also, we're getting a lot of it from possibly the texture also not being too fantastic, because it's just an AI standard, it's nothing special. Do you think I'm going to turn this one down now? Because I think that's causing too much across the top here. So we've pretty much got a very basic light setup, and we've just rendered it off there. So we've used this as our blocking guide, and this has been quite a long tutorial, so I probably will do this in multiple parts. I don't really want it to be much longer. This will just be the basic sort of lighting first pass, then the next one will go into matching the sort of probables. So there's been quite a long tutorial for this sort of basic lighting. I don't want to go on for too long, but hopefully you've got a good idea of, it's actually quite simple. On certain levels it's simple. I'm not saying lighting is simple at all, it's far from it. But you're getting this sort of you're getting a good start of it. So in the next one, we'll sort of start going into more using our reference to match them. I didn't realise we were already at 40 minutes. This is already a bit too long. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and we'll continue it with matching up our reference, and we'll start getting our lighting a little bit tighter. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.